Story 1. The Stalker in Aisle 3. I work the night shift at a 24-hour Walmart in a small town. My name is Emily, and for the most part, it's a pretty quiet job. But a few months ago, something happened that still sends shivers down my spine. It was a slow Tuesday night around 2 a.m. The store was nearly empty except for a few night owls and some regular late-night shoppers. I was stocking shelves in the electronics section when I noticed a man who seemed out of place. He was tall, wearing a dark hoodie with the hood up, and sunglasses. Yes, sunglasses indoors at night. It was weird, but I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe he was just trying to keep to himself. I kept an eye on him as he wandered through the aisles, seemingly aimless. After a while, I noticed he wasn't picking up any items, just walking around, glancing over at me every now and then. My unease grew, but I tried to brush it off. Maybe he was waiting for someone or just killing time. Then he started to get closer. He was in the same aisle as me, just a few feet away, pretending to look at some DVDs. I moved to the next aisle to continue my work, but a few minutes later, there he was again, just a few feet away. This continued for nearly an hour. I started to get really nervous, my heart pounding every time I saw him. I decided to take a break and headed to the employee break room. I sat down trying to calm myself, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I looked up at the security cameras in the break room, hoping to see something that would reassure me. That's when I saw him on the monitor, standing right outside the break room door, just staring at it. I froze. What was he doing? Why was he following me? I waited a few minutes hoping he would go away, but he didn't. He just stood there, motionless. I texted my manager, who was in the office upstairs, and told him what was happening. He responded quickly, saying he was on his way. Moments later, my manager, Mark, arrived and we checked the monitor again. The man was gone. Mark and I walked back to the floor together looking for him, but he had vanished. We searched the entire store and even the parking lot, but there was no sign of him. Mark assured me he'd review the security footage and alert the authorities if necessary. I tried to shake it off and finish my shift, but I couldn't stop thinking about the man. Who was he? What did he want? Why was he following me? The rest of the night passed without incident, but I couldn't wait to get out of there. The next night, I was even more on edge. Every shadow, every sound made me jump. But the man didn't return. Days passed and I started to relax, thinking maybe it was just a one-time creepy encounter. A week later, as I was leaving my shift, I noticed something on my car windshield. It was a note written in messy, almost childlike handwriting. It said, "I know where you work. I'll be seeing you soon." My blood ran cold. I looked around the parking lot, but it was empty. I showed the note to Mark and we called the police. They took a report and said they'd increase patrols around the store, but there wasn't much else they could do. I was terrified. Who was this guy? Why was he targeting me? For weeks I lived in fear, constantly looking over my shoulder, dreading my shifts at Walmart. But the man never showed up again, and eventually the fear began to fade. But every time I walk into that store, I can't help but wonder if he's still out there, watching, waiting for the right moment to come back. Story 2. The Ghost of the Stockroom. My name is Kevin, and I've been working at Walmart for nearly 5 years now. I've always been a skeptic when it comes to the paranormal. But one night about a year ago, something happened that made me question everything I thought I knew. I was working the overnight shift, restocking shelves in the grocery section. It was around 3 a.m., and the store was practically deserted. Just a few coworkers and me trying to get everything in order before the morning rush. I had just finished stocking the dairy aisle and was heading to the stockroom to get more supplies. The stockroom at night is a creepy place. It's dimly lit, with long, narrow aisles lined with towering shelves of merchandise. The fluorescent lights flicker occasionally and every sound echoes. I usually try to get in and out as quickly as possible, but that night I had a lot to gather. As I was loading a pallet with boxes, I heard a noise. It sounded like a whisper, but it was so faint I thought I might have imagined it. I paused, listening, but heard nothing else. I shrugged it off and continued working. A few minutes later, I heard it again, a little louder this time. It sounded like someone whispering my name. "Kevin?" I froze, my heart pounding. I was the only one in the stockroom. I called out, "Hello? Is someone there?" But there was no response, just the echo of my own voice. I tried to convince myself it was just my mind playing tricks on me, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I hurried to finish loading the pallet, but the whispering continued, growing more persistent. "Kevin, Kevin." It was coming from deeper in the stockroom. I decided to investigate, thinking maybe one of my coworkers was playing a prank on me. I followed the sound down a narrow aisle, my flashlight cutting through the darkness. The whispering grew louder, more urgent. "Kevin, come here." My heart was racing, but I pressed on. I had to know what was going on. I turned a corner and saw a figure at the end of the aisle. It was a woman, her back to me, her long dark hair hanging down her back. She was wearing what looked like an old-fashioned dress, something out of the 19th century. I called out to her, "Hey, are you okay?" But she didn't respond. She just stood there, motionless. I took a few steps closer, my flashlight illuminating her figure. "Ma'am, do you need help?" Still no response. I was about to reach out and touch her shoulder when she suddenly turned around. Her face was pale, her eyes sunken and hollow, and she was crying blood. She let out a blood-curdling scream that echoed through the stockroom. I stumbled back, dropping my flashlight, and ran as fast as I could. I burst out of the stockroom, breathing heavily, my coworkers staring at me in confusion. I tried to explain what I'd seen, but they just looked at me like I was crazy. We all went back to the stockroom together, but the woman was gone. There was no sign of her and no explanation for what I had experienced. I didn't sleep at all that day, and when I came back to work the next night, I was on edge. I avoided the stockroom as much as possible, only going in when absolutely necessary, and always with a coworker. I started hearing stories from other employees about strange occurrences in the store, but no one had seen the woman I described. To this day, I have no idea who or what she was. A ghost, a hallucination, I don't know. But I do know that ever since that night, I've never felt completely alone in that store. There's always a sense of being watched, a chill in the air that makes the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. And sometimes when I'm in the stockroom late at night, I still hear the whispering. "Kevin? Kevin?" Story 3, The Mannequin Mystery. My name is Sarah, and I used to work at a Walmart in a big city. This story took place about 2 years ago, during the holiday season. The store was always packed with shoppers, and we were constantly busy. But one night, something happened that I can't explain. Something that still haunts me to this day. It was a few days before Christmas, and I was working the closing shift in the apparel section. We had set up a special display of mannequins dressed in holiday outfits near the entrance to attract shoppers. They looked pretty festive, all decked out in red and green with Santa hats and scarves. I was reorganizing a rack of clothes when I noticed one of the mannequins had moved. At first, I thought one of my coworkers had adjusted it, but when I asked around, no one admitted to touching it. I shrugged it off, thinking maybe it had just been bumped by a customer. As the night went on, I kept getting the strange feeling that something was off. I'd glance over at the display, and it seemed like the mannequins had shifted positions slightly. It was subtle, just a turn of the head or a change in posture, but it was enough to give me the creeps. Around 11 p.m., the store was nearly empty, and we were getting ready to close. I was alone in the apparel section, folding clothes and straightening up, when I heard a noise behind me. It sounded like a faint rustling, like fabric moving. I turned around, but there was nothing there, just the mannequins staring blankly ahead. I went back to my work, but the noise came again, louder this time. It was coming from the direction of the mannequins. I walked over to the display, my heart pounding in my chest. As I got closer, I could see one of the mannequins had its arm raised, pointing towards the fitting rooms. I stood there, staring at it, trying to rationalize what I was seeing. Mannequins don't move on their own. It had to be a prank. I decided to check the fitting rooms, just in case someone was messing with me. The fitting rooms were empty, but as I was about to leave, I heard a whisper. "Sarah." I froze. It was my name, clear as day, but there was no one around. I backed out of the fitting rooms and hurried back to the apparel section, my skin crawling. The mannequin's arm was still raised, but now its head was turned, facing me directly. Its blank eyes seemed to bore into me, sending a chill down my spine. I grabbed my things and rushed to the front of the store where my manager, Lisa, was counting the register. I told her what had happened, but she just laughed and said I was letting the holiday stress get to me. She walked with me back to the apparel section, but by the time we got there, the mannequin was back to its original position, arm down, head forward. I felt like I was going crazy. Lisa patted me on the shoulder and told me to go home and get some rest. I left the store still shaken and tried to put it out of my mind. But that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing the mannequin's blank face in my mind, hearing the whisper of my name. The next day, I was determined to figure out what was going on. I came in early and checked the security footage from the night before. What I saw made my blood run cold. Around 11 p.m., the mannequin started to move. First just a slight shift, then more pronounced movements. One of them raised its arm and pointed towards the fitting rooms. Then, a few minutes later, its head turned to face the camera. I showed the footage to Lisa, and her face went pale. She called the police, but they couldn't find any evidence of tampering. The mannequins were just ordinary store models, nothing special about them. But the footage didn't lie. Something had made them move. The store removed the display the next day and we never spoke about it again. But every time I walk past a mannequin, I can't help but feel a chill. Wondering if it's going to move, wondering if it's watching me. That holiday season, I learned that sometimes the things we think are lifeless and harmless might have a life of their own. And the thought still haunts me.